Rim to River. This is one of the most epic day hikes you can do at the Grand Canyon. It's long, it's difficult, you'll lose and then gain almost a mile's worth of elevation, and you'll be left exhausted yet exhilarated at the end of a 16.5-mile bucket list hike to the bottom and then back up to the top of one of the 7 natural wonders of the world. This is what you can expect along the way: a trail's eye view down the majestic South Kaibab Trail to the Colorado River, and then the brutal climb back up the iconic Bright Angel Trail to the South Rim and the heart of Grand Canyon Village. Our start is at South Kaibab, which requires a ride on the park's free shuttle service or a taxi to get to. You can catch the orange Kaibab Route shuttle at the visitor center, and it will drop you off at the trailhead. No private vehicles are allowed. Once at the trailhead, you'll immediately begin a steep descent down a short set of switchbacks called the Chimney. If you're visiting in the colder months, you'll likely need micro spikes for your shoes on this section, as there's a good chance you'll encounter icy conditions. The rest of the year, it's smooth hiking along a canyon wall for right at a mile until you come to the place that always lives up to its name. This is Ooh Aah Point, the first place to take in those panoramic canyon views. It can get crowded at Ooh Aah, especially at sunrise, but the farther down you go, the less people you'll see, especially as the tourists realize they still have to turn around and hike all the way back out. Just after Ooh Aah, you'll really start to wonder if you're in another world. This is where the canyon just opens itself up and gives you some of the best views, I'd argue, anywhere in the world. South Kaibab is simply stunning and stays that way just about all the way to the river. A mile and a half from the trailhead, we come to Cedar Ridge. There are pit toilets here and spectacular views all around, but keep in mind there's no drinking water available anywhere on South Kaibab. You'll have to carry your own and refill at the spigots at the river or at Phantom Ranch. After a couple of switchbacks below Cedar Ridge, the descent becomes more gradual and the trail straightens out and stays that way all the way to Skeleton Point, which is another mile and a half from Cedar. When we get to Skeleton Point, where you might run into a resting mule train if you're lucky, we're 3 miles from the trailhead and about 3.5 from the river, and we've descended about 2,000 vertical feet with another 2,800 to go. Immediately after Skeleton Point, the trail gets significantly steeper as we hug the canyon wall and start down the notorious red and white switchbacks, which drop us about 400 feet in less than half a mile. It's only when we get to the bottom of the red and whites that we can say we are halfway to the river. From here, the trail becomes more gradual again and stays that way as we reach the Tonto platform and continue toward our next rest stop, the Tipoff. Here there's a shelter if you need some shade, an emergency phone we really hope we don't need, and there are toilets. It's our last chance for all, as our next stop will be the Colorado River, just over 2 miles away now. After the tip-off, we descend below the Tonto platform and enter the canyon's inner gorge. Still about 1,500 feet above the river as we make our way along the red dirt path and get our first look finally at the Kaibab Suspension Bridge, better known as Black Bridge, still far below. You can see how steep these switchbacks really are. Eventually we come to a 90-foot long tunnel, and on the other side, we have made it to the river. We are on Black Bridge, having descended 4,780 feet over 6.5 miles. After the bridge, we follow the trail for another quarter mile or so to this kiosk just outside Bright Angel Campground. If you go right, you can follow the trail for another half mile to Phantom Ranch, where you can take a break and have some of their famous lemonade. Or you can continue on across Bright Angel Creek, where there's water and flushable toilets. And from there, we continue on to Bright Angel Trail and the Silver Bridge, which takes us back to the south side and offers a far different experience than Black Bridge did. After crossing the bridge, we head downriver for a mile, which includes a couple of sandy sections that you might have read about. The advice here is to stay to the far sides of the trail where the sand seems to be more compacted and easier to navigate, but it's never like you're walking on a beach, and it doesn't last long, so the sandy sections are really nothing to worry about. The trip along the river is a neat one. You're on a trail that's basically carved into the canyon wall, and it's cool to see and hear the mighty Colorado for such a long stretch. Eventually, the trail makes a sharp left turn away from the river, and we're at the River Resthouse. Pit toilets, shade, but no water here. Our next chance to refill will be in just over 3 miles at Havasupai Gardens Campground. As we start our ascent, you can see we're hiking alongside Pipe Creek. This is why it's important to always carry a filter when hiking in the Grand Canyon. Water service at the rest stops is seasonal and sometimes is cut off altogether by damage to the Trans-Canyon pipeline. So it's best to always have a filter just in case. The canyon is not the place you want to get caught without water. Bright Angel stays fairly gradual for another mile or so after River Resthouse until we come to the famed Devil's Corkscrew. This is where we really start climbing and get the sense of what we're in for on the way out. At the top of the Corkscrew, you'll find a cool place to get a photo of what you've just accomplished. We still have a mile and a half to Havasupai Gardens, and just after the Corkscrew, you might start to see a lot of water on the trail, and even think you might have lost the trail. Well, you haven't. This section takes you through the creek as opposed to around it. It's possible to keep your feet dry in the makeshift paths on the side, but it's unlikely. So if you don't like soggy socks, bringing an extra pair is certainly advised. Before long, the landscape turns lush, which tells us we're entering the Havasupai Gardens area. At the rest stop, also the halfway point between the river and the rim, you'll find pit toilets and a place to refill your water. Barring a waterline break, the water at Havasupai Gardens is usually on year-round, and this can be the last chance for water before the south rim depending on the time of year. Water at the 2 remaining rest houses is turned off in the fall and not turned on again until late spring. Leaving Havasupai Gardens, we're still 4.5 miles from the south rim, and things are about to get difficult. We've climbed just over 1,300 vertical feet from the river to here, and still have over 3,000 feet to climb over the last 4.5 miles. The trail is again more gradual than steep for another half mile or so, but then we really start to climb. We'll gain just under 1,000 feet between Havasupai Gardens and our next stop, the 3-mile rest house. Again, toilets here, seasonal water, and a place to get some shade. But now is when things get serious. The last 3 miles of Bright Angel are easily the toughest of the hike. You'll see many folks in the forums and Facebook groups speaking of the agony. From here to the top, we'll gain more than 2,000 feet on legs that are already worn out. One way to keep your sanity and stay motivated is to break this hike into 1.5 mile chunks. From Havasupai Gardens to the 3-mile rest house, 1.5 miles. From 3-mile rest house to the 1.5 mile rest house, 1.5 miles. From 1.5 mile rest house to the finish, 1.5 miles. Embrace the little victories along the way, and eventually you'll get there. This section is relentless. The switchbacks can seem endless. But in just 1.5 miles, we come to the 1.5 mile rest house. Water and toilets available here, and you'll probably notice the trail getting more crowded as we get closer to the rim. Just a mile and a half and 1,100 vertical feet to go. Now you can look up at any time to see how much higher you have to climb, though depending on your mood, I wouldn't always recommend it. There's the lower tunnel. That marks 1 mile to go. Almost there. Always a possibility to see some of the canyon's bighorn sheep population around this part. When we finally come through the upper tunnel, the end is in sight. And there it is. Rim to river is complete. 16 and a half miles and more than 9,000 feet of elevation change later, and we are again standing on the south rim. The sense of accomplishment at this point should be overwhelming. You might even be saying to yourself, never again. But give it a day or two of reflection, and there's a pretty good chance you'll be saying, I can't wait till next time. As always, please subscribe to the channel so that we can continue bringing you more of the magnificence that is the Grand Canyon.